It is Devoted to a Soldier resource panel time, and the theme tonight is releasing anger. And you're going to know my mindset because I just said to Greg, I was like, what the hell are we talking about? We got
what are we getting involved in?
Oh my gosh. Before we get going and on the panel about thoughts, ideas, proactiveness, reactiveness, all of that jazz about the emotions of anger and releasing it. Greg, tell the world a little background on who you are. I just didn't pick you up on the side of the road.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exciting. So, and I'm glad. Thank you for having me on today. I'm very excited to talk about anger. I definitely used it as a coping mechanism and even as a survival mechanism. I was abused as a child, and I ran away as an adolescent, roughly about 10, 11 years old, and institutionalized detention centers and such, and joined the Marine Corps from a group home at the age of 17. And I went on to go do 3 tours in Iraq. And so after all that, that left me with a whole bunch of emotions that I didn't even know what they were while I was having them, how to address them. And, in the last 10 years, I've really just devoted my life to self-development and growth, and excited to share whatever I can today.
Shoot, doesn't that mean like you better like dive into something, because you have built a foundation of confusion and anger, like unknowing.
Oh yeah. It was I mean, everyone's journey will be, I'm sure, I have to assume, but it was a challenging journey, and some days still are.
Yeah, well, every day we all have them at different levels. And I have to say, like, comparing that journey and comparing that anger and that challenge, we cannot do, because our brains are completely different. There's not one brain that is the same. So how we process it, you might not have Greg's story, might not have like my story, but you have your own story. And to lie to ourselves and say that there hasn't been a buildup of emotions or a buildup of anger is kind of delusional. Would you say not?
It becomes a slippery slope. It's an easy way to not have to deal with it. And at first, when we're first taking those steps, it's such a huge mountain. How do we get to the top? And it's just each next step at a time. But with how big of a journey that is, in the beginning, we can easily lie to ourselves, but every little lie we tell ourselves becomes a very slippery slope into believing our own story, and then not being able to get help from someone else because we become so clouded.
Yeah. Don't you think we forget what lies? And I'm going to introduce Jim here. Jim is our third panelist. Jim's a very busy man. We'll introduce him in a minute. But don't you think that we forget ourselves what lies we've told ourselves regarding our emotions?
Absolutely. It's too hard to keep track of them, because at the time they're not even calculated lies. It's whatever fills the spot at the moment. So it's just too hard to even track.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, before we continue on, Jim, can you step away for a minute and tell the world a little bit about your background? Oh, he's like, step away. I've got Cub Scouts and kids and my life going on here. Jim is a pretty cool dude. In a minute, we're going to let him introduce himself, and he's got some great concepts and ideas on anger and releasing anger. He's going into the car. The car is always the safe zone. Never go to the bathroom, people, if you think you're going to be safe away from kids. Forget it. That's like a surefire way to get knocking on your door. But I want to continue, and he'll pop on and unmute himself when he's ready to talk.
I'm sorry, chaos in the tough house. It looks all organized in the morning on the video, and then in the afternoon, the life hits. Woo!
Jim, tell the world about that, and you tell the world a little bit about your videos, because we've all heard about the 22. He's been doing this for 400 and something days. He talks.
844.
Oh, 844. All right, Jim, tell the world a little bit about who you are, your background, really quickly, then you can mute yourself.
All right, I'm an Army infantryman. Was in 14 years. Never saw combat. I got lucky, and also not so lucky on that one, because kind of plays into survivor guilt and stuff like that, because I have friends that have perished and or committed suicide. So it's been a rough haul after getting out. All right, I can finally actually leave the house. Whew. But when I got out, I went through a rough period because I got out on a med board because I had 2 heart attacks in 1 month, actually. Died from one. And real quick, went through a divorce, and I still don't have one. Still don't have the kid. James, come on, we gotta go, dude.
So
All right,
this is why Jim is here with us today. There's a lot he has dealt with, and one of the reasons how he deals with his emotion is his videos every single day of putting it out there, and,
yes, I am, buddy.
and sharing with the world.
Buckle in.
Jim, I'm going to mute you for a second. Okay, I muted him while he gets the kids in the car. But I want to dig into the first question that we kind of goes into deeper about what we were talking about earlier is defining and taking ownership of the situation, right? So what does that look like? How do you define, Greg, how do you define taking ownership of the situation?
So I'm going to offer a bit of an extreme on one view, but my belief is that I've adopted the belief that we are an accumulation of the decisions we've made thus far. So even things that we have determined were outside of our reach, maybe we got in a vehicle accident, there was a house fire, I would even venture as far as to say, and I understand that I'm not asking everyone to adopt this mindset, but maybe use it as fuel to challenge where you're at when we talk about that ownership of our situation. You decided to live in Tennessee, you decided to buy this house, you decided to have the items in the house that were able to cause said event. If you had an accident, what time did you leave? What route did you take? What was your morning routine? And this where, it is my belief or my adopted belief that we are, again, an accumulation of all the decisions we made up to this point. Each one has counted.
So, okay. So now you make these choices and you take ownership. And this is where I think ownership gets very skewed, because for every ownership and every action that we take, there is a reaction. And sometimes we can calculate them, and a lot of times we cannot. So then how do you deal with that when you're like, I've taken ownership, I know I did this, and then that ripple of effect of it doesn't work out and it pisses you right off?
So yeah, that's a great question. So first and foremost, I believe that we may not be giving ourselves enough credit for what the ripple effects are sometimes. But understanding that I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree that somewhere there's ripples that then have become out of our reach. And at that point in time, essentially even identifying it in a positive motion. First and foremost, we won't get too deep in what's your higher power, because some things we just don't have total control over. But secondly, identifying each step that took to that ripple that you didn't have, we put it in motion with a butterfly effect at some level. So now identifying that thing that has upset me because it was out of reach, maybe I made it become out of reach. And maybe that anger is not a bad thing. It's an identifier for how I will redefine my system.
Oh, see, like that's a good thing. It is not, because we can, and I know Jim had talked about this at one point too. Sometimes our anger is a reflection on ourselves, how we feel about ourselves. And by making that statement, like you said, maybe I had something to do with it, it flips that anger internally. And people, I think, they don't know what to do with it, right? Because the pain is so dear and near to your heart. Then what? Because emotions are good. We are blessed. Like, I believe in God. Everybody else believe what you want to believe of where they came from. I can only speak from my own heart, is that God gave us emotions on purpose. Love, anger, jealousy, all of these things, good and bad, are here for a reason.
I would suggest, and let's keep in mind, I'm not a therapist, so it depends on where you are in your scale. But when we said that, so I determined that, hey, something that I did allowed this sequence of events to take place. Then we say, what about the person that, like, now that becomes so heavy, it's judgmental, it's my fault. I would suggest, and it comes to a lot of, it's a lot to processing. But I would suggest that if you can be the problem, you can have a solution. If someone else is the problem or something else is the problem, generally speaking, you're going to have an excuse. So while it feels heavy for me to be the problem, it's also an outstanding feel of ownership that I can conquer this. I have the solution. This is mine. This is my box. However messy it is, I have control of how this is going to come out. So again, if I'm the problem, I'm the solution.
I actually, that's such a great concept for people to think of, because we think when we beat ourselves up because we take these emotions and the pain and we turn them internally. But we beat ourselves up for what? You can only beat yourself up if you lay down and do nothing.
You lay down. If you keep going, I'm so sorry. You got me excited there. We beat ourselves up because we choose to stop right there. We said, I did something wrong. I'm the victim. Done. Shut down the shop. And then it's so heavy. But I did something wrong means, boom, what's the next shift? Where are we doing next?
Right. Even if that shift is a total screw up, right? Because not everything we do is going to be this miraculous, oh my gosh, I'm a genius. That action might actually be another screw up, but it's not the same screw up. It's on
Correct.
your path to what are the tools and resources that you can have to control and be creative and useful in these emotions that we have.
And if we take that next step, I'll offer this mindset. If we take that next step and we totally mess it up, right? So we said, all right, it was my fault. I'm going to take ownership. I'm going to fix this. And we take it out and we totally mess it up again. First, I have to evaluate, did I have more knowledge? Could I have acted on better knowledge in that decision? And if so, then we need to do better. So let's say no. Let's say that second decision I make where I totally mess it up the next time and I'm like, oh my gosh, I messed this up twice. Did I have better knowledge of that situation? Let's say the answer is no, I didn't. Okay. You just won the knowledge for how to do this better in the future. You own this forevermore. It cannot be taken from you. You can go broke and you own this.
Right. You're right. You're like slam dunk. Brian is staying here. He said, phew, a memory becomes an emotion that can transition to a mood. Doggone, our heads are complex. Let's talk about that a little bit. You have a memory that becomes an emotion, right? And therefore, that mood. Now, I think we lose our control. We give our control away when we take it from the emotion and we allow ourselves for our brain to create the mood. What if we could control our brain to create the mood that we want?
Yeah, no, that's huge. That would be, I think if we can do that, shit. I mean, what happened? Are we good?
Yeah, your like mouth was moving and your voice wasn't going.
I think what you said, if we can figure out how to control, you said, how do we control the mind to not create that? Because I agree. Once we get into that mood, it's becomes such a dark place, or can be a heavy place. So how to control the mind. And I'm not sure that, at what level can that be done, but something that I know that, and we even chatted a little bit about in the past, something that me and my wife have done around. So when me and my wife both become angry, if one of us are angry and the other's not, the one that's not angry is responsible for the other person. We just made that agreement. That's just our thing. But if we're both angry, then it's so hard.
Smart, Greg. Hold on. You're so smart. I just got to cut you out and say that. Okay, continue on.
If we're both angry at the same time, it's just so hard to see through. That becomes that mood, and then that becomes that cloud, that becomes that weight. How do we get through it? So, and I don't know, it all depends. Me and my wife got creative, and we actually made rules of how we would argue when we're both mad at each other. And then we signed off on them and we hung them up, and we determined so that when we're both mad, it was a place of accountability from that clear mindset.
So this is the part when we were talking about it earlier that I love, because I'm all about living proactively, right? Be proactive in your marriage, be proactive in your arguments, be proactive in your career. Like, we can't always figure out what's going to happen in our life, but we can definitely set some sort of plan and action to follow. So when we're raging, whether it's an argument with your couple, or why don't you have these rules alone? Why don't you have your own set of rules that you make up, that you're like, when I'm angry, when I feel like there is nothing left in me, and why am I even here? All of these things. Why can't you, before you get there,
your own how-to manual,
clear mindset, create your work? Yes.
That's powerful.
I think I'm actually going to do that. I think I just
Yes,
gave
yes.
myself a
I love it.
through
I need to
you,
do it
Greg.
myself.
I'm going to do that. So so now that we're talking, because this is great for, like, let's say a wife, a friend, a family that's watching from the outside and is seeing the volcano happen, is seeing that whatever that trigger was, and has changed the person that they love so much, right? You can see it from the outside in. What do you think what do you do in that moment? Or do you just love in that moment, and then when that moment's over, come back and set forth maybe some of these guidelines and tools?
I think you. Oh, is Jim going on it?
I don't know. I'm unmuting.
I would like, okay, I would say one thing with that, we have to know ourselves. We have to be able to pick up on our own cues that we're going to go, and if you can do that, you can kind of preempt yourself and say, okay, I need to step back, or I need to, put on headphones and listen to music or something for 5 minutes. Give me a chance to process what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and work through it that
What
way.
if you can't, though? Like, yeah,
That's
in
the way
that
to do
moment,
it.
though, there's a moment between it happening and looking back, and then actually being able to look forward and say, this is what I'm going to do first. So, like, you know what I mean? So catching that, because sometimes we don't know ourselves very well until after fact.
That's where it comes in. We've got to take the time to learn ourselves, especially going from that transition from being in the military, because you're one way, because we're usually type A. I had to become a type A minus because of my heart. And I still, I found out today I'm the mean one out of mom and dad from my oldest daughter. I kind of cheered that one because I've tried to dial myself back, but on the other hand, I also don't want to be too easy because life ain't easy.
Right.
But yeah, so you've got to learn yourself. You've got to learn what has changed within you, and what you can do going forward from there, to be able to know yourself. That way, when you're getting down, if you're starting to go down that downhill slope into, that dark spot, or if it's just a normal day, but you go off. You need to learn where those triggers are for yourself. And normally, for myself, I know when they're coming, and I tell my kids or whoever I'm dealing with, you need to give me a minute, or you need to fix something that you're doing that I've told you not to do when in the kids department. But like, I know it's not just about kids, obviously,
Right.
but in life in general, it's a lot of, you got to know you and know when to step back, or if you're going to be okay to stay in it. And I'm not saying like exit stage left, and you actually might have to, but I'm saying take a step back and, all right, all right, I can do this. I can figure. Let's do this.
Yeah. So kind of what I'm hearing for when, like Greg, you were talking about taking that ownership, right, and taking that control. That's the first part. Is you have to realize that you have to own that you're gonna get angry, right? You're gonna
Absolutely.
get whatever those emotions are, right? Because some people actually go the other way, and it's not anger. They get super in this high, but that high is also very dangerous.
Absolutely. Well, and another thing which we tagging into what Jim was saying, like when we talk about learning ourselves, and right, and I think kind of tying also into what you were saying, Danny, like if once we do learn ourselves, like then we'll become in a better place. But through the journey of learning ourselves, I'd offer or suggest that we have emotional reactions to beliefs that we adopted and didn't even know we adopted. So even breaking down, what is it that we're reacting to, and is that worthy of my emotion? Like you literally might determine, oh wow, not even, like I didn't realize that I was getting angry at this because of something that happened in my childhood that just doesn't have value no more.
Right.
But yeah.
So what would, because these panels go so fast, and especially when you're fired up, as we're closing this up, what is your advice, your tool of going from ownership, knowing yourself, and in a healthy application? Like, what is something you have personally done that you could give that someone might be like, shoot, I've never tried that. Let's do that.
So this is really what I used in the beginning, and it was very helpful. I don't know. It's just real life application.
Yes.
Okay. So yes. So I believe that we all have an emotional mindset and a logical mindset. So we know logically we should do X, Y, Z, and we have emotional response to certain things. So somewhere along the lines, I figured out, okay, there's two different things, and that I'm being too emotionally responsive to things. So I would literally make the if I was getting angry, that was a trigger that, hey, we need to just look at this from the logical standpoint. That may or may not have solved it, but a lot of times, just telling myself like, hey, we just have to look at it. Like I didn't have to commit to doing any action, just looking at it from a logical standpoint. So sometimes that was enough to pull me out of, because that little zone you talked about of where it's not clear no more. Sometimes that was enough to say, hey, this isn't clear because it's emotional. Let me just look over here for a second. And that helped me for whatever it's worth.
That's a lot of worth. It's a lot of worth, Greg. That's a lot of worth.
That's awesome.
Jim, how about you?
I used to tell myself if I got angry, I did something wrong. I've learned that's not true. So I stopped telling myself that. And the other one was if I'm getting angry, I lost the argument. That's also not usually true. But that was one thing that back in the day, it helped keep me calm. But then I learned that that's not always the truth. So now I take a step back. I think about what we're arguing about and making sure I'm staying on point. And if I'm getting angry, make sure that the anger, how can I turn this in the right direction? And also when I'm done being angry, I go back, especially with my kids, and I hate to say it, I have no life. I raise these guys. I go to work. I come home. That's pretty much it.
That's a big life, by the way. That's a big life.
It's the best life, but there's not much out on the other. I engage on here. I don't get angry at work, so because my workplace is all vets, we all get along, we all have the same understanding. But if I do get angry at my kids, I'll always talk to them, right? I'll always come and talk to you and be like, we need to fix this, and then this will be okay, right? We do something like that. And then I use the word sorry judiciously, because we've got to repair both sides. Otherwise, you build up anger on both sides and you never resolve anything.
Yeah. This was really amazing. And there's a man out there watching who has responded on here. And no, I never warn you. And yes, holy shit, I told you every time that you see me, put your big boy pants on, and I love you to the moon.
No.
He's on there right now. Thank you guys. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Jim, for coming on and sharing your value in this. I couldn't have picked two better men to talk about. And when I say men, very like, I don't just throw that around. You have to be a big man to be able to talk about anger, talk about emotions, talk about the failures that you feel you've had, the successes, and that have brought you onto the other side and share with the world. So thank you both so much for your time and your business. Both of you are in between worlds. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, guys, we will see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have fun at Scouts. And until next time, everybody join some sort of table. I'm Italian, so I use the word table, but join something, be part of something. Your life will be more fulfilled that way. Till next time. Bye-bye.